Coming through okay. I'll get my speakers muted so we don't have a fun feedback loop. I want to make sure I can get this going on LinkedIn properly. Last time I couldn't see the event, which made it so that people sending messages and stuff I couldn't respond to, which is kind of crappy for a live event. If you're watching this recorded, it might not matter so much to you, but I'd like to see if I can kind of get this sorted out. So give me one moment here, please. The goal today is going to be walking through some actual code, which is fun. Yeah, I don't see it. This is nuts. Okay, well, I'm sorry. If you're on LinkedIn, if you want to send messages, you can try tagging me in the comment, because I can't see, when I'm streaming this, I can't see the event that got created. And the way that the chat works from LinkedIn is that it goes through an event as a comment. So I truly am unable to see, and I am trying my best to be able to respond to stuff, so I apologize. But kind of like some of the previous videos that I've done, not the Monday live stream. That one's more about software engineering, sort of in general, career stuff in general. This is going to be walking through code. So we're going to be looking at some ASP.NET Core middleware. I'm going to get us set up doing that. I'm going to be referring to some other code I have written on another screen, so I'll periodically be looking over to try and figure out what the heck I'm doing. Because this is the kind of thing that I'm not coding all of the time, but I find that I'm starting off a new application, a new web service. I probably need something like this at some point. So we're going to be looking at middleware in particular. Just trying to get some stuff pulled up here. So I'm going to get a new Visual Studio solution going on. We will look at some exception handling middleware. And this is kind of interesting because maybe we'll start off with sort of like the base case where you have some API built. And if you're not familiar with ASP.NET Core, I'll kind of walk you through some of the very basics when you have a request that's coming in and what happens when your API is being hit. And we do have some stuff that's built in for like debugging and things like that. You can basically get like a whole error screen, but I don't want to do that. I want us to be able to potentially get to the point in this little live stream where we have some custom error handling messages and stuff like that going on. So let me go ahead and get my Visual Studio set up here, and then I'll switch over to a different view so you can see my screen. I also want to double check this is going to YouTube properly at the same time here, so seems like it is. I'll make sure that I myself get on the stream, and then I can double check anything that's wonky as it's going on. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make my ASP.NET Core Web API. We will call it error middleware example. I'm not sharing my screen yet. Give me one sec. And we'll do that. Once it's in Visual Studio pulled up on my screen, I'll get it shared here. One sec. There's probably an easier way to do that too. Okay, and now to share, my face is going to disappear in just a second here. So, whoop. We'll do that, and we'll bring my face back. There I am. Cool. Okay, so I've just gone ahead and made a sample application, and this is going to be... Oh, did I do the wrong? Oh, sorry. I saw an HTTP file here, and I was like, hey, what the heck is this? I don't use these yet, so I'm going to skip over that. But this is the sample weather forecast. So again, I'm going to walk through a lot of this stuff from the very basics, right? So the sample weather forecast application does come with some endpoints we can work with. Very simple stuff. And, oh man, did it make controllers? This is not what I wanted it to do. I wanted to use minimal APIs. I don't like using controllers now. Okay, let me see. This is happening because I'm on my second computer that I do recording on, and I do all of my development on another computer. But I had to switch because of my microphone setup. So, let's see. I thought I picked that, but I guess that's not what I want. Right, I thought that was what I wanted, but why did it... You know what, there's probably an option where it says minimal APIs or not. Use controllers. Oh, that's what I picked. Okay, let me go. I'll add this one in. I'm just going to basically copy over all this code, get rid of some of this stuff. Sorry, this is a bit of a mess to start with. I'm just trying to do this quick so I can... We don't need open API. We'll get rid of that. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of this other project. Sorry if that was a little bit confusing. I just wanted to use minimal APIs instead of controllers, especially when I'm streaming here, because I just want to have it all on one screen for you guys. Okay, so using minimal APIs, we have an ASP.NET Core web service here. So we will have the builder pattern kind of getting us set up to go make the server for us. What else is going on here? Some Swagger stuff. This is just for API documentation. We turn on HTTPS, and then really what the entire server is doing here is that we just have this weather forecast route. So if you've worked in ASP.NET Core before, this is truly just the very beginner template application that you have to get up and running with. So nothing fancy. It's just a kind of a placeholder for us, right? So the way that this works in ASP.NET Core is that we have routes that we can set up. So this is going to be a GET request that we can fulfill. It's at /weather forecast. And then we go basically do some fake work in this case to go return a forecast. And this with name allows us to have that in our doc comments, or I guess I should say in the open API. I got to watch out because I'm going to keep saying open AI instead of open API. I apologize in advance for doing this. I know it's going to happen. But yeah, this just gives it a name for us as well. But we don't have to really worry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll back that up. And we're going to end up getting rid of the weather forecast stuff. Or maybe we'll stick with it. I might as well stick with it. But I want to show you guys when we get into error handling and stuff like that. And it's not going to be about error handling in the sense of recovering our application. It's going to be about just having some more information when we have an error happen. Okay, a few more things that I want to add for context here. We do have stuff like Aspire. We do have things like Azure Application Insights. There's so many tools that we have available to us that will allow us to have information on our routes when things are going wrong. Things is going wrong. My goodness. Okay. It's not even early here. I don't have an excuse for not being able to speak properly. But there's lots of tools that we have that can help us diagnose this stuff. So my goal walking through this is not to say, hey, you got to go do this because this is the only way you're ever going to know how to handle errors on your APIs. Literally not the case. This is just to show you that you can do some stuff like this. And I like going through examples like this because you might say, hey, I remember watching that live stream or watching that recording where Nick was talking about error middleware. And you might go, like, it kind of draws a connection for you where you're like, I don't need error middleware, but I need something else that can have, can handle requests and do some logic for me. And that might help trigger in your head, like, hey, maybe I need some other middleware. So the goal is not to say, hey, look, follow this pattern, do it exactly this way. This is the only way to build stuff. This is just for ideas. And I'm doing this because I'm going to be making YouTube videos about some of this content. So I'm walking through it for me, and you get the benefit of exploring it alongside me. So remember, you can ask questions and stuff in the chat. I will try to answer as I'm going along. If it happens to not be about the topic that we're going through, that's cool too. I'm happy to pause and answer. I would much rather spend time on things that are important to you than just kind of blasting through this stuff. Because if I was just trying to blast through it, I'd turn the camera off and I would code it up and be done with it. So the weather forecast route that we have, if I go run this, let's see. I don't know what browser and stuff it's going to open in or what screen. This other screen, of course. And it's zoomed in about 1,000,000%, which is funny. So zoomed in literally all the way. Okay, so we have this. This is the Swagger page that we get pulled up here, right? So what was the route? It's /weather forecast. Right, so if we go hit that route, we do get a weather forecast, right? This is just the return value off of that web API. I can't see too sharp zoom in. Do you need me to zoom in on this more? I can if you'd like. I I can't zoom in on everything else because when I'm streaming, I'm using basically 4K resolution, but I'm using 1/4 of my monitor to show you guys what's up. So if you need the code bigger, let me know. But if you're curious about like the text in the bottom and stuff like that, like it's not going to happen on the stream. You got to wait for the YouTube video. So I apologize. But you might just be trolling me with that. So I appreciate it. Okay, no, good. It's not a bad programming joke. It's one of my favorites. I just wanted to make sure because I am streaming it and I would feel very bad if I go through all this and people were like, Nick, we couldn't see a thing you were doing. I have streamed before and I've mentioned this where I forgot that or I thought my audio was on. I didn't forget. I forgot to check it. And I was like 15 minutes into helping people build a calculator and someone in the chat was like, hey, we can't hear you. How embarrassing do you think that was? Okay, so we have a weather forecast route. It works. Nothing too exciting. We didn't even code it. It just came out of the box like that. So what we can do from here, though, is we can talk about throwing exceptions, right? So instead of doing that at all, we can go throw a new invalid operation exception. I'll start putting this onto a new line. Try to keep in mind that there's this chat in the top right, so hopefully it fits. And what happens if we go call this route? It's launching a different screen. So we go call this route. It's really funny. It looks like Chrome's not remembering my settings. And or maybe it did. I think I zoomed in on the JSON. So we hit weather forecast here. Right? Exception thrown. And then we get this page, right? So what's interesting here is that we have this when we're debugging and we're looking at it in a browser, but one of the things that is important for me, and this is just like it's a personal development kind of thing. So again, I can see people are joining the stream and stuff, so I will kind of remind people as I'm going along. What we're going to be looking at is putting in error handling middleware. And what I would like to be able to do is have some type of JSON structure and not a dedicated screen for this kind of stuff. Furthermore, the JSON structure that we'd be looking at, we have a couple things to be thinking about when it comes to APIs and reporting errors. So it's not a simple thing to solve. There are public APIs that I've used where as a user, which is a developer in this case, right, I call the API and it doesn't work. And instead of just saying bad request and you're like, well, that sucks. Like, what do I do? Like, why is it a bad request, right? They actually give you some really valuable information. Like, hey, you didn't set this parameter, or you did, but it has to be this type. So having some type of verbose, debuggable information as an API caller can be awesome. Personally, I would like it to be almost codified. I don't want to have to think about it for hitting a visualized web page all the time. If I'm just debugging some stuff on my own, this is totally fine, of course. Like, there's information here, not a big deal. But I would like to be able to put some middleware in place where we can go look at perhaps transforming what that looks like within the stack that we have. So another thing to call out in case people, oops, I just spat on my computer. Don't do that. Another thing to call out in case people aren't familiar with how this stuff works in ASP.NET Core is like, we had an exception, but our server didn't crash, right? So I put out a few YouTube videos recently talking about different exception handling patterns. This is a perfect example of an exception being thrown, right? Literally, you can see it on my screen, exceptions thrown, and it doesn't bring down the whole application. So for the most part, I haven't gone and looked inside of the code that does the handling of the routes, like inside of the ASP.NET Core code, but I imagine there's a big old try catch around a lot of stuff. And it allows us to continue. It allows us to do this kind of thing, regardless of what type of exception we throw, right? So if I change this to a timeout exception, or let's do like new file not found exception, right? So where I'm going with this is that people don't like this type of pattern, where you have basically a try catch like this. The chat. We need a big old try catch in life, really. Yes. Yes, we do. So, you could put some type of handling here, but really people get up in arms about seeing this kind of stuff in code because they go, hey, look, you can't just catch every exception. That's terrible. Don't do it. But I bet you there's something like that behind the hood here. And like I said, we could go dig up the code and go find this and prove it. But like, I'm going to go run this one now. And let's go see if I pull it up. By the way, there is a goal that I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm just trying to walk you through some stuff to show you like where my head's at. But weather forecast, right? Oh, did I not? Oh man, I didn't put throw in front. Well, that's embarrassing. Can we get hot reloading? No. My hot reload is not properly set up on here. I should change the startup URL too, but I'm not doing that. Okay, so exceptions thrown, right? Where's my browser? There it is. Cool. So my point is that I just threw a completely random different type of exception, and we could go try a whole bunch more. And I can guarantee you, I would bet money on it, that there isn't some try catch that has like 1,000 different exceptions listed. It's honestly probably something like an empty, or sorry, like a just catch all exception. It probably is something very much like that. And the reason why that's the case is because they need to be able to say, look, someone's calling this route, and if we're just having a request to this route, we should be able to say something went wrong, tell the caller, and not bring the entire server down. That would be pretty catastrophic if we just had one route do something that was a little bit unexpected and the entire thing got killed off. So there are absolutely times where putting a try catch every exception is acceptable. I do it all of the time, and that might make you feel a little bit uneasy, but I definitely do it in situations where I have code that I'm calling that happens to throw exceptions and I don't have control over it. Or I can't possibly know every exception. But I do know that if it fails, regardless of an exception being thrown or a Boolean return value, whatever it is, sometimes there's exceptions used for control flow, not my choice. And I need to be able to sort of intercept that and say, don't bring down the whole application. I also don't know all the exceptions you can throw. Just keep going. So now that we've seen that on routes we can have this type of thing, what I want to be able to do is put some middleware in place where instead of having this screen pop up, what I would like to do is create some JSON structure that we can pass back. So what I started to talk about before I was showing these examples is that when it comes to passing back error information to a caller, there's a lot of things to think about here. And one of the things is that if you have an API that you've built for a product, let's say, so let's say you're not even exposing this to other developers on purpose. This is just for your back end and your front end communicating to your back end. And you put some code in place that has too much debug information on the API calls. That could be basically like a security vulnerability because people can really start to see how your API is working. They can start to try and execute different things on it. So you're basically providing more information and someone might try to abuse it. So there's lots of things to think about. And it's really this balance between like, what's going to help you and what's too much. And if we have other scenarios we can think about, like we're running the app with a debug build or we're in a debug environment versus a prod environment, we can do different things like that. I'm just checking the chat. Public static task run sync, run async this host cancellation token, try finally. Is that what's inside there on the on the ASP.NET Core code behind the scenes? Because I bet it's something like that, right? A try with a catch of any exception and a finally block. Yeah, there we go. In source of ASP.NET Core hosting. There you go. It's a thing that exists, right? So it's not the end of the world if you do it, but the reason that people caution against it is because usually, especially for more junior developers, it's like you have exceptions being thrown because you don't understand better ways to communicate error state or state that is not expected. and therefore it must be exceptional, therefore you throw an exception, and then you have code where you're like, maybe it's not exceptional, so we have to catch it, and now there's try catches everywhere. It's just, people are trying to caution you against doing ridiculous things, but there are cases where it's valuable. So on the return types that I want to start looking at, when we saw the weather forecast stuff coming back, it was a nice JSON structure. What I think would be interesting to try doing is that we can package a standard format. And what we're not going to do is build that standard result out. We're just going to do it sort of on the error handling middleware. So I just don't think I'm going to have time to kind of show that we could do like a, I don't know, like a more generalized middleware that could package up every response, but I do want to think about it through the perspective of the error middleware. So that might sound a little confusing, but we're going to jump into the error middleware, but I have to remember how to go add this because like I said at the beginning, it's not every day I go do this. So I think I have to go, oh, it's app use exception handler. Cool. So we got this thing here. Okay. And we can actually put our own exception handler into this. How did I do this before? I need this request delegate. Okay. So I'm just looking at the code on my other screen. So we basically end up having to wrap this. Sorry, my keyboard's not sending keys strokes anymore. I'm trying to put a close parenthesis. You could probably hear it on the microphone. It's not being sent. That's funny. Copilot bug, I suppose. Okay, so when we go to use this, we're going to have to go put a delegate into here for handling. And the way that we need to do that is that there's a request delegate. Let's see how we can go structure this. Where's a good spot to put this? One sec. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. Add exception handling T, and then inside though, I need to go put this this run call, and then I need to put in the middleware. And in my example application I built, it's a little bit more complicated. Like I have a class that's using dependency injection. I don't know if we're going to get that far into it, but I'm going to start with just a method on this for now. So I'm going to have a void error handler, and then thank you, Copilot. So we get something like this, but this isn't quite right because I think this is the syntax, and it's not that either. Can I use a task on this? It's literally between two computers, and I only have one mouse, so I'm trying to, like, do this at the same time. Okay, let's start with this. I might have to jump over to the other computers super quickly, but this, I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. I think this is the request handler. Request delegate? No, it's not, apparently. Well, let's check it out. It is a task. Okay. So we will put a task here. We'll make it async. And whatever, we're not going to do that part for now. Okay, so we're going to write back that. Can I just write async? There we go. This should work. We can see that this is now not complaining at us. And that way, when we go to throw an exception inside of weather forecast now, just by hitting this, we should be able to hit our middleware. So this is a start. Okay. Oh, that's funny. I didn't even type. I don't know if you can see that, but I didn't even type in weather forecast and hit enter. And it already went here. Peculiar. I don't know how that's possible. But okay. So if you're watching this and you know how that was possible, because again, you can see in the browser, or man, I just clicked off, but I had typed like that and it wanted to autocomplete, but I hadn't hit enter yet. And then it still did this. So very interesting. But okay, now you can see that we hit this, right? This is basically like we put a big old try catch around everything. And now we're able to intercept and do something with the response. So if I press F5, see, like it didn't actually do it. That's so weird. I have to do it again because I don't know how it hit that code path before. Okay, this is what I was expecting to see. So it says, oh no. I don't think that the key is dodgy. I think that there's like a prefetch thing or something weird like that, but I don't know enough about what was going on, especially through the browser calls like this. This wouldn't happen if I was calling it obviously through a direct API request. But let's go try it. I'm just curious. I want to go run it again and see. And I will try to take my time as I do this. But so what I was doing was highlighting over, and I'm going to start typing weather forecast, but I'm going to tell you when I press enter. So W, just press W. That's all that I pressed was W. So I don't actually know what's happening there. That's very odd. But I wonder if we go into the exception handler, what is the request, right? Sorry, this is where the text is going to be very small for a lot of you, so I apologize. When I make YouTube videos, I change my whole resolution, so it's 1080p, but I'm not doing that here. But it says, on the request, it says that I put in that whole URL. I absolutely didn't. I told you as I was typing, I only pressed W. So, very odd. Very odd. But are there headers, perhaps? Or maybe I'm not even able to see them here. Oh, there's the request. It's like pre-flight or something. Prefetch. I think that's what's doing it. There's some weird prefetch thing going on. So I don't understand it. If you know more about this and you want to drop some knowledge bombs in the chat, or if you're watching this recording, you want to add some comments, that would be awesome. Hello. I love pizza. I'm live streaming, so I would love to eat any type of pizza that is top of mind for you. My wife says hi. It's her birthday, and we're getting pizza. So that means I will have to go through this quick because there's going to be pizza. So the prefetch is what's kicking in here, but that's kind of besides the point. But like I was saying, if you know more about this and why that's happening, kind of cool. I wonder if there's cases where you need to handle that, like, or do particular things, but that's kind of a new thing for me. Okay, so the error handler is something we have control over, but this is where I have to jump over to my other computer super quick because there's a way that we can go pull the exception information, and it's based off of a feature that we have access to. So one moment, because I didn't plan very well for this because it's way over here. I'm not even going to try to turn my camera to show you, but if you haven't seen pictures of my desktop setup, there's like, I don't know, if I stretch my arms out to the sides, I can't reach the ends of my monitors. And then there's more beyond that. So give me 1 sec. Happy birthday, Mrs. Devleater. Yes, my wife's name is Leah, and she's awesome. Okay. Okay, so I can see the code on my other screen now. So basically, off of the context, oops, not const, off of the context, we have something that is called features. And then we can get this other feature, and I don't think it's called that, Copilot, come on. I think it's called exception handler path feature. Yo, how you doing? I'm doing pretty good. I was just telling people on the stream I'm getting pizza soon for my wife's birthday, so I'm going to have to drop off in a moment, but I hope I can get to the punchline of this because I think it's a pretty cool thing. So we'll get this feature pulled out. I'm going to try spacing it down a little bit here. And then, Okay, on this thing, we're able to get the error that came back. I will let her know you say happy birthday. Thank you so much. She will appreciate that. She was doing some yard work and I wasn't. And then I figured I could sneak away and do some streaming so that I can get my YouTube videos ready. And then she knocked on the door and said there's pizza coming. So, okay, the next stage that we can do with this exception feature is we can ask for the error, right? So that's going to be the exception that gets thrown. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this into another variable so we have it here. This is kind of interesting because I think this can potentially be null if you forgot to turn off the feature somehow, but I think it's going to be enabled by default for us. So let's go ahead and we'll do something like this. We're going to put that... Will this serialize JSON for us if we pass an object in? Let's find out. No. That one will, though. Okay, so we can do something like... my goodness, exception type. So something like this, just to start off, okay? So I'm going to go run this again. How is the stream? I think the stream's going well. This is going to be about error handling middleware and ASP.NET Core, some of the framing for a YouTube video that I will be launching next week. And I like trying to stream some of the content so you guys can see it being put together. So that we're gonna, oops, I got to do something with this pre-flight thing. This is annoying. Okay, so if we go into here, we get this exception feature. Okay, from there, if I step over, I know this is hard for you guys to see with the very small, what's it called, resolution, so the tooltips are really small, so we do get the error that came out. So that's cool. Is there anything interesting to see on this? I don't think there's anything. It's coming back as a file not found exception, so nothing. Thoughts on returning a problem details type class? Yeah, so Nick Hodge, that's sort of what we're going to be getting to, is building like a custom problem details type of thing. And then the goal is that I want it to be able to show it getting wrapped up, so you could essentially use like a standardized API like object. So you could have like, what's a good word for this? It's like a, I'm drawing a blank here. There's a word for it. Something union. Indiscriminate union? I'm saying this wrong. C# doesn't have support for them. It's that. It's basically the ability to have like a multi-type. So I want to be able to do something like that, but I was showing, or I was explaining earlier, we're not going to get to the happy path, so all the good calls aren't going to use that, but at least we could show it kind of working. Discriminated union, thank you so much. I tell people that when it comes to making YouTube videos, it's like, yeah, exactly. When it comes to making YouTube videos, it's easy to, like, you can mess stuff up and you're like, whatever, I'm just going to edit it out. But when you're live streaming, it's like, yeah, like this is some insight into probably how much I mess up when I'm putting videos together, but it's live. I can't undo it. And I think there's something nice about that. You guys can see like what goes into this stuff being put together. So I do want to be able to do something like that, is build essentially like a one of on the return type. So we can see, there we go. I'm just printing back JSON instead of us getting that that screen, right? High latency pair programming with idiots like me. Well, I wouldn't call you an idiot, absolutely not. But I think the pair programming point is very interesting because on one of the previous streams, we were doing downloading of files, and the file downloading, I was trying to look for headers, and I had people in the chat being like, hey, check this, check that. It was truly like pair programming, and I don't think they had the right answer, but it at least pushed me in the direction to find the right answer. So there is a ton of value in it. I stream regularly on Monday nights, 9:30 p.m. PST, and that is general software engineering advice. So I'm a principal software engineering manager at Microsoft. I've been programming for 21 years, managing teams for 12 years in startups, and Microsoft is big tech. And the Monday night streams are general software engineering advice. So you will not usually see me going into code on those streams, but I put out YouTube videos. I put about 3 YouTube videos out per week that are code. I do a software engineering interview / podcast as another video in the week. So there's at least 4 videos that go out every week, plus that Monday night live stream. And then I try to show in my other streams that I can walk through code to go put those things together. As I see on your channel, you have nothing on your channel. I don't know what channel you're looking at. If you're looking on Kick, it's probably because I don't know how to use Kick. But my channel is here. I'll put it in the chat. So that is me. Hopefully that goes through in the chat. Doesn't look like it's getting sent to Kick, though. That's super annoying. It's basically Dev Leader on YouTube. That's so funny. The Restream tool that I'm using, the chat comes in from everywhere, but it showed me that it went out to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. So for the person messaging on Kick, Queen Alexia, I'm sorry that message did not go to you. But you can see it in the stream window, I think, right? So hopefully you can check that out if you want to see my other videos. I haven't customized my Kick yet, so that's where you're looking. It's not customized. Okay, so this is the basics for error middleware, right? And we can do other things, like we can put the trace on here, so we can put the message. Thank you, Copilot. I wanted to do the trace, so we can do this kind of thing. Something else that we might want to do is think about like a friendly message and a debug message. I am planning to do customization at some point, but I do so much content creation that I have not yet had a chance to go over and spend time on Kick. That's the short answer. So these 3 things will provide back on here. If we go have a quick look at this when it's running. Go back to the weather forecast. Oh my goodness. Come on. Prefetch. Okay, I'll zoom back out. So we can see now that we're getting some JSON built up. And again, for me, I liked having this because in the spots where I'm debugging this usually, I have, say, 2 things written in C#, or I have even sometimes, say, front-end code in TypeScript, and I'm calling my API. What I don't want to do is, like, I'm trying it in the browser, or I'm trying it in Postman, and I'm like, hey, it's working, cool. And then I go try it in code, and I'm like, it's not working, and I have no useful information. Sorry, I'm not looking for services, so thank you, but no thanks. This part here, if I were debugging and connecting some of my things that I was building together, would be helpful for me so I know what's going on. But there's more we can do, right? So something else that we could look at is doing something like fluent validation. So let's go back into the code. We could go do something like, I don't know. I'm not going to go build this properly. So if you guys have seen fluent validation, let's go over to... I'm not going to go build a fluent validator because that pizza is going to be here not too long from now. But we can do something like put in... Oh, I'm in the wrong tab. Fluent validation, right? Almost 500 million downloads. It's very popular. So I'll pull that in. And what you can do with fluent validations, you can make these validators. So you would inherit from this abstract validator. And that way, when your request comes in, you can pass it into the validator. It can go validate it for you. And then you can basically write your validation logic on your requests in a way that's very easy for you to read as a programmer. And then the result is that you can actually pass that information back. So I'm not going to go build a whole fluent validator, but if we assume that we were to call something, right? So we're going to go do the validation, and if it fails, so I'm just going to put if true, right? But imagine that was saying, like, if the validation was not successful, we could go throw an exception here. And this is where I would start to break some of my rules with flow control. And I'm going to back up in just a second, but I break some of my rules for flow control in terms of exception throwing. Okay, so the reason I'm saying this is generally what I like to do is never throw exceptions. I don't like doing it. However, I'm saying this and I haven't yet put it into practice, but as I'm writing out one of my current APIs, I'm getting to the point where I'm saying, hey, you know what? I want to standardize my message responses and the error types that come back. And one way that I can do that is instead of every single route trying to call some class that says, hey, how do you go format this? How do you go make this do the right thing? What I could just do is let them throw exceptions when it's bad. And the thing that I haven't fully figured out, and the reason the reason I'm not going to be doing it in this live stream is to standardize the return object in the happy path, because I would like it to be wrapped up in something that is going to be uniform across every route that I have. I think middleware could be a great option for that. So I will explore that further, but at least for errors, what I don't want to do is like if the validation, I don't want to have to go like call code to format, like specifically error response. Can't type, there we go. And then we'd have some other logic down here for some other error, like you're trying to do authentication now, or you're trying to do look up a resource that's not available. And we have to keep calling something to format the error response. I don't want to do that at all. And especially because there's going to be code that we call out to. And if that can throw an exception, we still need something that's going to handle it in the middleware anyway. So what I'm trying to do in my own code is switch over to be something like, instead of formatting error responses here, just throw an exception and let the middleware go tackle that for us. So if the validation failed, we could have a dedicated exception for that. I'm just going to throw a format exception. This is not what I would recommend, so I'm just calling it out, but we could do like new format exception, validation failed, missing, you forgot to put the ID on something, okay? So we could throw this exception, and that shouldn't say return, sorry, throw. And what else? I cut out the forecast. Okay. Whatever. It's not happy because I have an if true, but I was just trying to show you like that's where validation would go. So yeah, you'd do some validation, and if it failed, right, then you'd go into this code block and you would throw some exception that was like a validation exception. That's the goal. I'm just using format exception as an example here, but that means if we go check out our error handler, I'm going to show you what I would start to do, and then I'll explain how I would start splitting this apart, because what I'm about to show you makes me feel a little bit sick to my stomach. But I have patterns for that I like to move away from. It's just that they introduce complexity and they don't make a lot of sense in the beginning. And we're not going to get too far, which is why jumping right into it is not going to help. But what we could do is something like this. So if error is format exception, we go do something specific. Okay, so if this was your validation, so someone's sending you a request, right, and it's missing parameters, and you're like, hey, I can't even fulfill the request you're trying to do. And let me, you know what, just to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to make a validation exception. Thank you, Copilot. Makes this super easy. I'm gonna do this specifically so that we feel like I'm not breaking too many rules here. But so we would catch this specifically in here and say, hey, it's a validation exception. We know that in our stack, this is only thrown when someone makes a request to us and we can't handle it based on the fact that they've left out data. It's kind of like what you would normally get if you had a bad request response. And that's what we're going to do. So we can go ahead and basically, you might do something like this. So we would say context.response.status code 400. So we can do a 400, and then we can actually write back. And this is where I would like to do a structure for this. Okay, so if we had, this is going to be a little bit hard to think through because I haven't fully figured it out yet ahead of time. But I would want to have a standard type of response. I've already said this a couple of times. So it might look something like, I don't know, some type of API response. Okay. And we could have a, the data, or we would have an exception. So I would do something like this, but exception I don't even feel good about. This is going to look super gross, so I apologize. So we'd have exception or error, and then we could also do something like, this is because we don't have, sorry, I'm scrolling back up in the chat, as Nick Hodge pointed out, discriminated unions. We don't have this ability in C#, but this is how I would probably want to structure some of this code. And I would do a bool. When the error is null, then we have a success. So I would want to do something like this, and I would write out a new one of these. And we could do that. Clean this up a little bit. So you can see on my screen for here, we're saying, this is why it looks kind of gross, because I still have to like make an API response. I'm passing in null as the data, but we are going to format an error object. And again, what we might want to do is provide different details here. So this error object, instead of just having a normal object, we probably do want to give it a dedicated type. I used object right now because I don't yet know what I want that type to be. So if this were someone calling our API, okay, we have to think about who can call this. And I hinted at this earlier. If it's our own service, so one of the developers on our team is calling this, we might want to be able to give them more information. We might want to let them know, like, you're having the stack trace happen on the server, and they can go, oh, I know what that's going to mean. I can debug this easier. But the reality is, like, if you had this publicly exposed, you probably don't want to be sharing stack traces outside of your application. So there's some things that we might want to do to get around that. So, for example, you could do this a million different ways, right? But you could do, like, if you're running this in debug, you can stack this other information onto your error type. You could do this kind of thing. Again, I would not use just a normal object. I would have a type for this, so it would be strongly typed, just a heads up. But I'm not going through that quite yet. So we'd do this, and then basically if we would start building out these other error types here. So we'd return after that, and otherwise, if we had a problem that was not a validation exception, what we might do is something like, I don't know, let's see, I'm going to copy this, so I'll pass a 400 back, and we could still do an API response. I'm missing one of these. Okay. And then we could do like message like this. So I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just showing you that you have some patterns that you can start to form here. So what you start to see shaping up here is that if you have certain types of exceptions that could be common across your API calls, such as validation exceptions, right? So anytime anyone's making a request to any API in your service, you want to give them the validation details that come back out. You could start to package them up in a nice way. I'm not saying that what I built is nice. I'm just saying that you could figure out whatever nice means to you. So you could go do that. And I'm trying to call out that you have some other stuff that like is helpful when debugging, but probably not in a production scenario. So do be careful about that. But let's go look through what we can start to have going on here. So this is going to be a validation exception, and this is going to complain at me, but I'm going to put another exception here. Oh no, this is bad. Okay, so we can't hit this yet. Is it going to run for us? Didn't complain this time. Okay. It's unreachable code, so I figured it would. Okay, now it's going to do that silly thing. It didn't that time. It didn't do the prefetch. Okay. So F5, again, I step through it. Is it a validation exception? Yes, it is, right? So then we go into our special logic for this. We'll write a 400 back and then dedicate this very specific object as the return type. And I am running in debug mode, so we should get all of that data. And then you can see, and you can change your JSON serialization. So we can make it so that null on data never gets written out. Like, this is kind of just extra information to pass back, but you have to think about the API you're building. Maybe you expect callers are looking for this all the time. I like omitting nulls because, in my opinion, it's just extra data that's being sent and it's not offering value. So if it's not there, it's null. I treat those as the same thing. But then you can see that we have an error coming back, and trying to see, it didn't put the success on there. So we'd have to go change or like look at our JSON serialization and see why success was not put onto that. So I don't know if that means, I didn't make it public. It was a simple mistake. So because it wasn't public, the serializer didn't know to go pick it up. Let me go run it again. Okay, so that time it did prefetch. Okay, so if I press F5 again on this one, I think we should see whether or not there's a success on, and there is. So you can see right here, this could be very helpful on the calling side, right? You can basically decouple, and this is just an opinion of mine, you can decouple yourself from the HTTP status codes, because there's multiple status codes that can mean success. It's not just 200. So someone might say if request equals 200, and then someone goes, oh, but I think it's like a 206 or something, like still a success. But like basically, if someone starts misusing the status codes, or they have a slightly different meaning, and you just want to know if the thing worked or there's no error, you can use a flag for this. There's so many different things you can do here. Again, I'm not telling you what's right and what's wrong. I'm just giving you options to think about when you're building this stuff. Yeah, you can go ahead and ask about the courses on Dome Train. I'm happy to answer. I'll if you just want to type out whatever you're thinking, I'll kind of pause what I'm doing and answer you. So this is shaping up. Are they more like the talks on the subject, or are they checkpoints with like projects? Oh, good question. The structure of, I'm trying to think, for all three courses, the refactoring one is a little bit more like walking through some projects. So they're mostly structured like going through different pieces of information. Actually, this is a good opportunity. I know this isn't a plant, by the way. Jonathan C is not paid by me to ask about Dome Train courses, but thank you for asking. Let me pause and I can explain, because I don't like to push courses. I feel like if you're interested in that kind of stuff, great. But it's not for me to, I think people learn best by doing, right? So I think people learn best by doing, but I think that there are people who will go find courses or something that, especially if they pay for them, they feel a sense of like, I don't know, they have to be committed to doing it. There's an accountability part. And the example that I like to give is that for bodybuilding, right? I've been interested in bodybuilding for as long as I've been programming. So I've been in the gym for like 21 years. And I still paid for a coach, not because I was like, oh, like they're going to teach me things I've never thought about, or I don't know how to do my diet. I know those things. I've been doing it for 21 years. But I was paying a coach because it made me feel accountable. So for some people that can be helpful. Other people, maybe not the case. But I'm going to go to courses. Let's find this one, for example. So I just wanted to find, is there no link to just my name? There. So the refactoring one, if we pull this one up, You can see that there's some things in here that are like projects, but they're not getting you to go build projects. So that's the thing that I want to call out. I think the best way to go learn is to go off and build the projects, but the way that I structure these for Nick Chaps is not, hey, here's an outline for a project, go build it, and then come back. I think that could be interesting. I would be happy to write courses like that for Nick Chaps on Dome Train, but the style of them is not quite like that. So just to give you an example on this one, right? So like, what is refactoring? I walk through these concepts. And show you how to go do these types of refactoring. Same thing here. But in some of them, I try to include like a demo where we go looking for more specific examples. Hey, John. John is from Latterly.io. John is awesome. It looks like my LinkedIn chat is actually working too, so that's awesome. So Jonathan, I think that for the most part, you'll see people going through like bigger projects and stuff, but I don't think that they basically tell you to go off and go build it and then come back. I think that's the common pattern. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, I don't think you will find it exactly that way in these courses. Although in every course I put out, one of the things I say in one of the first 3 videos of the course is make sure you're programming alongside me, because I honestly feel that you will not learn your best unless you're doing that. But yeah, if you have more questions about these courses, you can definitely ask me on LinkedIn, on X, anywhere you want to reach out. I'm going to put these in the chat in case folks are interested. Thank you for getting me to advertise my own stuff, because I always forget to do it. So yes, John, who joined the chat, is from Latterly.io. I'm not sure if he's still on because I can't really see too clearly from Restream, but John's awesome. So we got a link to Latterly.io. Can we drop that in here? Shout out to John. Cool. I'm going to go back to my code over here, though. So we were just looking at shaping up basically like a common response. Now, again, this API response object that we built, if I go back here, this is only getting used in the error case. We would have to think about how we sort of enforce every API call to do it. And instead, what we could do is have middleware that will take any object you pass back and wrap it up for you. And John, I'm going to be dropping off in just a moment anyway, because I heard my wife, I think she's going to pick up the pizza that was coming. So it's her birthday and we're having pizza. So the other thing I'm going to do is walk through this other scenario that we had. So it's not a validation exception now, right? So we're not going to go hit our dedicated logic here. And that's because we wrote this specifically for validation errors, because we want to have more context, like, hey, you forgot to add in this property on this JSON object we were expecting. Especially if you're using Fluent validation, you could do some awesome stuff there. Let's see if we're going to get the prefetch stuff. No. Okay, so exceptions thrown, right? It's not a validation exception. This one should be very lightweight in the response. It's not going to tell us anything. Press F5, right? You can see that we get this object style still, where we have nothing for the data. Success is false. But then we have this really lightweight message that's just like, hey, sorry, this sucks. But you can look into going to parse this type of thing now if you needed to. Or again, if you're like me and you're just working inside of your client code calling your server, I just want to be able to see what's up, right? So in fact, if I go back into the code, for my error handler here, whatever we see up here, I would probably still have something like that here with some sort of a if-def for debug, or if I'm in development mode or something else, I'd want to make sure that if I'm more, air quotes here, privileged to be able to see some type of error information, that I can go check that out. Because using the error page is not going to be helpful to me if I'm calling this in code. Again, this is all stemming from the fact that I am building client, server, web APIs, and I need to make sure that when I'm building out the calling code, that when it's messing up, I have clear indications as to why. I'm not sitting there fumbling through stuff, because you'll have ridiculous things where, like, just to give you an example, let's say we wanted to go return a new object back here. Okay, so we're going to return a new, this would get serialized into JSON, right? So let's do, I don't know what a good thing to do here is. Value equals 1, 2, 3, okay? So we go call this. I just want to show you how simple some of these errors can be when you're kind of working with a web server and a client. Okay, so we get value 1, 2, 3, but there's already something very interesting about this, and I want you to have a close look. Put them side by side here. If you pay close attention, the word value and the word value are not the same. One has a, this seems ridiculous, but one has a capital V and one has a lowercase v. Depending on your framework, whatever you're using, your JSON serialization could literally say, this with a lowercase v is not the same as the uppercase V. I don't know what to do with that. And I have absolutely myself written web APIs where someone passes in the wrong casing. So your whole thing looks almost perfect. And now you have to go find a word that has the wrong casing on it and hope that that's what's going to fix it. So instead of having that type of situation, I like making sure that I can have some error middleware that really makes it obvious. Like, hey, like, you know, you don't have value set on here. And you'd be like, yes, I do. And then you're like, why is it telling me value's missing? And then you have a closer look and you go, oh, right. So having little things like that that point you at where the issue is can save you boatloads of time when you're debugging. And that's why I wanted to put this example together. And that's what this YouTube video that I will make out of this is going to talk about. So yeah, John, caps can bite. Good point. Good to see you. You're probably already dropped off, but John's an awesome guy. If you don't know John, I mentioned Latterly.io in the chat. Check him out. He's a lot more active on LinkedIn now, but he's pretty big on the TikToks. So it's really cool to see John drop in. He's got a lot of data about things that he talks about, which I think is missing from a lot of creators, including myself. I use a lot of anecdotes. This is all my experience, but especially for people that are, say, more new in career, they're doing their job search and stuff like that. Like Latterly.io and what John talks about it's all built around data. He's got a PhD in economics, and I love shouting that out because I think it's so rad. But he leverages like looking for data to back things up and is very data driven in his approaches. So do check out Latterly.io if you haven't heard of that, and check out John on TikTok and LinkedIn. Okay, that might be where I'm going to wrap this one up, but I did want to shout out and mention where this is headed next, because this will either be the next stream, or if I don't get to it, I will just create a YouTube video about it. But I mentioned a couple times, what we've been able to do is if we have errors that get thrown, then we're going to have a common way, thanks to middleware. Doesn't matter if we have this route or if we have a route right below it, right? Some other route here. Doesn't matter. Anytime you throw a validation exception, we will handle it in a consistent way. This is super powerful when you're building APIs. It's super powerful for code maintenance so that you don't have, if you keep scaling this out, like 100 different spots that have to know how to format something that should just be defined in one spot. Because if you change that behavior, you don't want to go change it in all those spots too. So that's part of it. And that's specifically for errors. But now what happens if we want to have a common return type for errors and your happy path situation? You don't want to have the same problem where everyone has to know how to go format things. So I'm curious and trying to see if I can go write a middleware for the happy path that will package up any object. And if we go look at this API response that I wrote on the data property, we will package it up on the data property. So every API response would have an object with a data property, and it will also have a success flag on it, right? So if the error field is present, success will be false. If the data field is present, success will be true. And then you can have a more common parsing set of logic on the client side. So that is what I will be building next. Happy birthday. I will let my wife know you say happy birthday to her. And we also got cats yesterday, so that was part of her birthday present. We have 2 little kittens. They're in the next room over. As these cats get a little bit older, I am so pumped to bring them on stream. They're so cute, but they're too little right now. They're scared of everything, so... Okay, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much. I hope that you got to see something interesting with the error middleware here, right? We got to see this exception handler path feature. We got to see, if I scroll back up, use exception handler, and then you can hook up your own middleware. Super cool, super powerful, and other middleware lets you do other really interesting stuff as well. So thanks, folks. I will be streaming Monday night, 9:30 p.m. PST on Software Engineering Topics. Do check it out. Would love to see you there. And if you have other things that you would like to see me stream about in code, whether it's directly in C# or you want to have more general software engineering topics, please just reach out to me. Leave comments on stuff and just ask for what you want to see, and I'm happy to try and put it together. So thank you so much, and I will